Hello?
Commissioner Mullen, you're there?
Yes, I am. Thank
Okay,
you.
all righty. Okay, so we are back in session. We're going to reconvene the budget workshop. It's 1:33, and I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. We've been working extremely hard and been spending a lot of time with Tim, probably more than he wants to spend with me, but it's been fruitful, and Tim's been really amazing. So we're getting into his Super Bowl time, if you will, and coming to the finish line. So I'll toss it over to him.
Well, we're pretty much at the same point as yesterday, other than I got updated numbers from County Road, and so added those into the budget. So then was able to get the miscellaneous funds budget totals of $84,900,000 for the miscellaneous funds. And other than that, there hasn't been any other changes made to the budget at this time. So all the stuff from yesterday still stands.
And I gave you a call, Tim, and I would really like to see us not raise or move anybody except for 11s in the courthouse. I asked you to check with the Public Works Department. They have 3 11s, but they're all vacant. There's nobody there. So there's only 2 11s in the courthouse, and they're both the auditors.
Correct, that's my understanding.
And they are auditing, actually, they're doing work that the state is paying us for. And in order to get that legitimized, we need to basically be above minimum wage, which it barely is. But they have to be accredited for being able to do that audit, correct, for the state?
I'm not sure of the mechanics of that. Jeff may have more information on that.
Information on that, Jeff?
Well, yes, we're required to do the audits now. This started back in 2020, but due to COVID, we haven't been able to do the audit, so the state has continued to send money to us, but we've not been doing the audits. That is changing, and so it's turned over to us. But our entry-level 11s are not going to do the audit.
Oh, they're not going to do the audit.
No, they got to be here to service the customer. So we've got to take our most experienced people who understand DOL and actually get them to the sub-agent, or Tim and I will have to go out and do those audits, which is fine, but that will further constrict our ability to help out in other areas. So that's basically what we'll have to do.
Okay, now I understand it better. So they will take on more responsibilities in the office.
Correct.
Okay. So at this time, I would like to see us leave everybody's salary and their grades in place except for those 2 11s and move those to a 12 until we get Connor's study back. Otherwise, all we're going to do is create tension in the courthouse.
That's a difficult proposition for a person to accept in view of the numerous one-off changes that have taken place this past year. Were I a county-level employee whose position was up for consideration, and I watched other people get theirs increased and mine didn't, I would rightly ask, why not? We've been promising Consor for more than a year. I know that the assessor has a particular concern in this area, and I'd be interested in hearing from Mr. Rosenauer if he wants to speak to the positions that he has requested be addressed. They were brought up previously. 2 commissioners acknowledged that they saw the need, but the board has never actually taken a position as to whether or not it should or shouldn't be in this budget. So, Mr. Rosenauer, if you're inclined, this would be your opportunity.
Well, I certainly, Commissioners, support all of the employees of the county getting treated and compensated adequately and correctly. I think that's just the right thing to do. And I've certainly held the position that I don't think we should have 11s. That's just my opinion. I think that's too low of a wage for anybody and any caliber of individual that we have employed by the county. However, that's not my issue. Mine is just simply the request that I've had before the board that, again, yesterday it was not in the, last Wednesday I brought it up, and at least was commented on by a couple of commissioners that they thought it should be considered for the positions that we have in our office, which will, one of them is definitely a revenue generating position. It'll generate more revenue than it costs for the position. The other one is going to keep us out of some real trouble in the future when that individual retires by getting somebody trained. However, yesterday I saw the items weren't in consideration again for those staffing members, and I don't believe they're in consideration today, and yet there hasn't been any action by the board that I've heard to remove, modify, approve, alter in any way those positions. So my position is I've given each one of the commissioners a letter, emailed it earlier and hand-delivered today at this meeting, just simply requesting that be something that is brought before the commissioners as a vote to either up, down, approve, change, or alter. But I think it should be by the vote of the board. So I don't know if you have any questions on what my letter was and my concerns, but we're not going to meet statutory requirements if we don't get at least that one position filled, and then later another one, the other one for the GIS person. So we'll be very, very short, and I've given all of you a list of RCWs that spell out pretty much the requirements that we would not be meeting.
So, Mr. Rosenauer, my understanding is, and I'm going to lay it out, and please correct me on any detail that's not right. The one position is necessary for us to go after a lot of the new construction that we haven't been able to achieve previously. Two, the revenue generated from that effort would pay for the position and perhaps a bit more. And three, and most importantly, the compounded over time loss of not collecting that new construction data today, right, because we build on previous numbers, is not just, if we don't do it, it's not just the cost of 1 year's revenue. It gets compounded over time and becomes substantial money for the county. Is there any part of that I've gotten wrong?
No, that is correct, and more so than just the county, as far as our general fund or road department, it's all of the taxing agencies or taxing entities within the county that have had, that will lose out on revenue.
Okay, well, at a minimum, I think that position needs to be in this budget. Not so much for the short-term revenue from the new construction, although that's always good, but it'll go to pay for this job. It's the fact that we've got a duty to those other taxing districts to collect their revenues wherever possible, because they're in the same pinch that we are, and the fact that this is a geometric progression going into the future. What we can collect in the future is predicated on what we collect in the previous year. And for every year that we don't collect everything we can, we further handcuff ourselves in future years. So my position is, and hopefully at least one other commissioner will agree, that at least that position needs to be in this budget.
And we're talking literally if we took last year's, this year's, and if we don't get it filled and we lose some from next year on what's anticipated we would lose by not being able to get to it, we're talking billions of dollars over the life, quite a few. I mean, just in the next 25 years, we're talking 24, 25 million between the county and all the different taxing districts in lost revenues. So,
Okay, John, you went from billions to 24 to 25 million. So
just in the next 25 years.
let me just go over some numbers with you. You propose this position, and the cost of it's going to be 94,000.
Approximately, just south of 100.
Your first year income that you said we could generate would be 74, if I remember right. And
First year was last year, was a little over 13,000 we lost last year.
But
this year
coming
was about 70.
24 will be about 74,000. 25, it'll go up to over 100.
And then those three
So-
compound, so you're over 140,000 for the 2025 budget year.
Just so we're getting the facts out there for
Correct.
the people to hear.
Now, that's just for the county's
construction.
budget. That's
Yeah.
just us. That's
Yeah.
not Pasco and the other taxing
But
districts.
the other taxing districts aren't in a budget crisis that we are in. We're taking 1.5 million out of our rainy day fund. 1.5, we're
understand
going to
that,
be down to
Commissioner.
600,000.
Yeah, I understand that.
And then we're going to have Tim in here reporting on revenues, and if they continue to go down, we're going to have to cut. So how smart would it be
And
to
that
hire
too.
to cut? Because who's the last one in is going to be the first one out.
Well, that would be a decision by the commissioners. I'm simply saying what the statutory requirements of my office are
Exactly.
for all the taxing districts.
Yep.
And they'll be losing about $750,000 in all the taxing districts for the 2025 year if we cannot get all of the current projected new construction, which adds and it compounds. Those don't go
Exactly.
away. Those continue.
I understand.
Yeah, every
I
year.
understand. But we are trying to balance a budget, and if we keep hiring people, I'm not saying we can't hire them. I'm saying we can hire them later in the year after we see the revenues, what
The
this
problem
trend
with
is.
that, Commissioner, the problem with that is we start our work now. We're already doing it as of December 1st, moving forward. So if we wait and hire somebody in July, they will not benefit us until the 2026 year, not the 2025 year, and we'll be even another year behind. So we follow the markets. We are always approximately 1 year behind on everything that's being done. And so if we're not keeping up with it, we're already behind. So
Who collects these taxes after you figure them out? The treasurer.
Treasurer
Is the
collect-
treasurer going to need more people then? Because
I can't speak to the treasurer's need. I can only say we send the figures up to them, they send out the bill and collect the money.
but it does work hand in hand.
I'm not saying it doesn't. I haven't disputed the treasurer's needs whatsoever. I'm just saying that if we don't do it, every taxing district and the county suffers, and the revenues coming in is greater than the expense going out.
Okay, and then you've stated that we're doing mass appraisals on residential.
We have to do mass appraisal across the county. That's the statutory requirement by the
So I've
DOR.
already asked you in a previous conversation, why don't you take one of the personnel from there, train them up, and get them out in commercial? Since we're doing mass appraisals, why do we need so many in
We're
the
doing mass
residential?
appraisal on every property.
Commercial,
It's-
the new property, the new
We do
commercial
mass
property?
appraisal, other than new construction.
New
We're doing new
construction?
construction, but we're still statutory obligated to do all of the mass appraisal on all properties. We
So-
can't ignore Peter to pay Paul.
No, but the mass appraisal should alleviate the workload of those individuals, correct?
No, it's, mass appraisal is done on 100% of the property every single year, whether it's been done the previous year or not. We
Right.
do all properties every year, physically 1/6 of the county, and so every 6 years, physically, new pictures and eyeballs are on it. But we do every piece of property every single year. So it's not like I don't have excess wasted time for a residential appraiser to train them on commercial, to ship them out on commercial, because they're literally busy doing the residential.
So
and
you're doing-
residential new
You're
construction.
doing appraisals on every property every year.
We have to, 100%. It's in the
So
RCWs
what
I
hap-
listed for
What
you.
happened to we were doing 1/4 or 1/5 of the county every 5 years? That's
We're
gone.
doing 1/6 physically. We're physically out there driving and looking and photographing 1/6 of the county every single year. But 100% of all parcels has to be assessed, statistically analyzed, mass appraisal data done every single year. That changed in 2014. So it's 100% of the properties. Yep. So.
So your office, I've run over the figures previous here, your office has grown the biggest of all the offices in the courthouse to this time.
We were the furthest behind. And I gave you guys the data for that, and you yourself voted for it, knowing
Yes,
that
we
that
did.
was a fact.
Yes, we did.
Correct.
But you keep coming in and you're asking for more people and more people. And John, I'm telling you right now, we're going to have to find a budget here that we can work with.
Commissioner, I totally understand that. If I was sitting in your shoes, I'd be looking at the hard decisions just like you. I'm elected to do what I'm elected to do, and I'm under the Department of Revenue's requirements for that. If I can show you our revenue is greater than the expense for a person, it justifies the person, let alone being statutorily required to do so on that. So I can't take away from the fact that we were doing 240 to 260, 280 million in new construction, and all of a sudden now we're over 500 million 2 years in a row. When you start doubling those demands, the staff that took care of 240 to 280 million is not adequate to take care of 500 plus million.
Well stated.
And I totally understand where your commissioners are at. It's a tough one.
Well, and John, I got to be honest with you. We're looking at, and this is completely off topic there, but we're looking at $2.7 million that we're paying people not to take our insurance, our health insurance. That would definitely fill this budget gap, for crying out loud. I mean, here we are, we're in this budget crisis.
If you could stop 100% of that expense going out, Commissioner, I'd agree with you. But just in my office alone, those that take it in cash or a portion thereof would take it in a different policy, and it literally, in my office, would have cost the county more money. So, I mean,
That's yet to be determined. That's
depending on what the coverage is. I
I'm
just was looking at my staffing only.
Yeah.
That's it. Nobody else.
Mr. Rosenauer, I think you make some excellent points. The county's priorities ought to be, first and foremost, to comply with statutes. You've identified that these positions are statutory essential. We need them to meet our statutory obligations. The only thing I can think of that is a higher priority, or should be, than meeting our statutory obligations, is meeting those statutory obligations that directly fund our revenue stream. We should meet all of our statutory obligations when and where we can, but there ought not be anything in the budget, in my opinion, that takes on a higher priority than a position in your office that is statutorily required, that generates revenue, but most importantly, and this is a piece, I don't think people comprehend this. Maybe they do. I should give them the benefit of the doubt. But the compounding effect of not collecting those dollars today means that the amount we can collect next year is restricted, and the year after restricted more, and the year after restricted more. It's a compounding effect. It is not a perfect analogy for penny wise and pound foolish, but it's darn close. It's penny wise to save a few bucks in the budget now that is obviously challenging, but it is pound foolish in the long term, and it's just leaving a lot of money on the table. I think that's really the bottom line to it. And you and I haven't spoken before this meeting, but you did correctly point out that you brought it to the board some time ago. 2 out of the 3 said that we thought it ought to happen, and then it never got another discussion. So I thought it was important to discuss it today. Lastly, and if my memory is incorrect about what all is in this budget, I seem to recall that there's some money or position or partial position for a PR person in the commissioner's office. I would darn sure cut that before I would cut a position in the assessor's office that covers additional revenue for new construction.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at all the other departments. I just know that some of them had needs. They hadn't been addressed, but
And
I
I'm working from
specifically
memory,
looked at
that's
them.
just one I remember because it's close to home, being in the commissioner's office. But my point is that when you've got something that it meets a statutory obligation and affects our revenue today and compounds into the future, show me something that deserves a higher level of attention. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying our office is the only one that would do that. Certainly, if there's other offices that bring in revenue as well as need.
I understand.
I totally am open to that whatsoever, but I can only present.
But the treasurer
what is
cannot
my
collect
office.
what has not been assessed.
That's true. That is true.
That is the rock bottom of the equation. If it doesn't happen in your office, we cannot collect it.
True.
And again, it's not just we can't collect it this year, it's that next year, the amount we can collect is constrained.
Yeah, and the amount that we have collected over the last 5 years that the county has collected just on new construction in the last 5 years is north of $1 million in new construction, and that compounds every year. So, because it stays with the highest lawful. So, any other questions at all?
No, I just appreciate your observations about the benefits.
Okay, thank
How
you very
people
much.
take it,
And
it still
I
costs.
got one more statement.
Sure.
That should be your main priority,
What's that?
what you just stated about new construction. That should be your main priority.
I cannot neglect other statutory requirements.
No, you can't.
to just do that. And new construction has to be done in a certain phase period of time. You know, there's calendar layouts, and it's like planting a crop. You can't wait to plant your wheat in July or August when you need to be getting it in the ground early because you won't get a yield. You won't get a
I
harvest off of it.
understand
It's
that,
the
John.
same principle with the stuff that we have to do in the assessor's office in the timing that each phase has to be done.
And I think that, I agree wholeheartedly with you. But I think that you need to be thinking more of cross-training people so that they can move over and do some other things.
Commissioners, my people are cross-trained. I've got sheets that both my assessment value, my appraisers have filled out. We've got that. There has been, I will tell you, there's a 10 times increase since I came into this office in cross-training of staff than there ever was.
Okay.
It's happening. Now, part of that, though, part of it, Commissioner, is their union employees, and the unions bargain and negotiate what they can and can't do, and I have no say in that whatsoever. That is between the commissioners and those union bargaining units. So I'm getting 100% out of every employee, that I can tell you, or they won't stay working for me. So.
Well, I appreciate you, John. I appreciate
I
you
know you
coming
do,
up
Clint.
and explaining this, but you definitely understand where we're at.
Oh, I understand. Yeah,
And
I
as far
totally
as that
understand the
public
decision.
relations person,
Yep.
the way it's been explained to me is that there is grant money, and when I sat in on that Eastern Washington Council of Governments, 3 counties reported on hundreds of thousands of dollars that they got for different things in their county. If we're not getting that money,
Yep.
and we're only paying him $65,000, and he brings $1 million back to this county, you don't think that's worth its money on
I
a trial
believe the
basis?
million is worth something, but when you're losing nearly $1 million a year to all the taxing districts and it compounds, you're looking at $20 million only for last year, this year, and next year's on the compounding over the next 25 years. That's not counting what we get in new construction for 25, 26, 27.
And John?
Yeah.
I wish I could look into that magic globe and say we're going to be as strong as we are today, but the way it looks, it may turn for the worse for us too.
Then you're going to
And
need
that
every bit of new
might
construction you can
dry
get.
up and not be nothing.
Well, if new construction dries up and I don't need the staffing, then guess what I need to do?
That's right.
Okay. I totally agree with
seen it
managing
happen
the office to
before.
the need.
We've seen it happen
Yeah,
before,
yep.
and we're well on our way to that same predicament.
Yeah, I believe in managing to the need.
Okay, thank you, because
okay.
we can't predict the future. I won't try to.
Tim, I have a question about the budget. Is the PR position that's been discussed here this afternoon, is that in the budget as grant funded or as current expense funded?
Current expense funded. There's not any grant revenue budgeted currently, but I think the hope is in the future that it would.
And I understand that there's a project manager position that may be relocated to outside of current expense into the road fund, and therefore it might look like a savings to current expense, but it's still an expense to the county. You're just moving the position and then claiming a savings on it to pay for a PR position.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Thanks, Chair. Just for the record, this person will not be doing public relations. They'll be doing government affairs. They'll be doing grant identification and writing. They'll be working with lobbying groups, and they'll be our primary contact on the federal, local, regional front. So I don't want it to get spun that this is a PR person, because I handle all the PR. They'll have PR expertise, but will not be working in that space. And that's all I really wanted to say about that.
Thank you.
Well, whether we call it government affairs, or public relations, the skill sets and the overlap is extensive. I've worked in all three for 40 years.
The chair recognizes Auditor Matt Beaton.
If this, and I guess if this is the new version you're considering, obviously the request the auditor's office made, other than, are those still there? The question I have.
Yes.
I have a question actually for John, and here's why. So as you guys are aware, we're also waiting on the consort study. And it's my office that is, and we've got 11s and 12s, and I wanted you to look at the accounting staff. The ones that are up here now have specific funding for them. I showed them to each of you where the Department of Motor Vehicles stopped doing the auditing of the subagents and pushed it back to the county auditors, and they funded it. And so we've been getting those funds since 2020. First year, I think it was around 60, and right now it averages around 120,000 a year in funds from additional money coming into the county for the function that these positions are included for. But one of the things I'm confused on, and I guess I'll get together with Sean, and it doesn't make sense to me how in the past, under past assessors, and maybe you guys understand this and you can tell me, because I don't get this. It doesn't make sense to me. If you had 10 houses and you have to get to 10 houses as new construction, and you only get to 7, that means in that year you miss the chance to add those 3. But those 3 are added next year. So however so then that money never comes to the county or any of the districts at all? I mean, so it never shows up on the rolls?
I can answer that for you.
That's why I really want.
can.
No,
Because you being
don't-
an old appraiser, you understand
No, I
appraisal.
want it in the compounding of it. It's,
So from the time that the building permit is put out or the time that there should be a building permit
well,
put out.
use the analogy, because if you put too much around it,
So let's
everybody
take
gets lost.
your analogy of 10 houses and we got 7 of them done and the other 3 we didn't get done. No, we are not allowed to pick them up for new construction and add that to the budget the following year. Those 3 just adjust the levy rate for the following years, the same as the first 7, but you cannot get the new construction money.
But then right. So that's okay, so then the compound, they're still charged at a mill rate for that, correct? It just doesn't.
No, it does not compound.
No, it doesn't compound, but I'm still
And
saying
it
they're
does
still
not add
taxed
to
and
the
it's still-
budget, does not add to the budget whatsoever. The highest lawful budget is the highest lawful budget. If you don't get new construction, it does not raise the budget. The following year after that, it will help lower levy rates, but it will not add to the actual highest lawful budget for the county to spend.
And then the other side of that, I guess, is when they don't get caught that first year, they're just not taxed for that cycle?
For
or are they?
they're not taxed for their portion of completion.
Right.
And the only way we get to pick any of it up is, let's say that as of the end of July, it's 50% completed. Then, of course, there's still another 50%, and that gives us a shot at that part of it the following year as of the end of July.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay.
I guess it does now, but
Yeah.
there's a part of it where obviously if we're not collecting it, they're not paying it, but I guess here's where I'm at. I need to come up and advocate more, I guess, because I've lost, degreed accountants and seasoned professionals, to the assessor's office, to the IS. I've lost them all over the place. And part of it's because, quite frankly, I guess I don't come and advocate enough like everyone else does. And so in this case, for these, I know you guys have some hard decisions to make. These positions are funded far in surplus of what, through that debt money since 2020 that is new funds, and I'm happy to get that to you if you need to see it. But yes, you guys do have a difficult decision on your hands here because we're in a bad spot. And when I went through my 3% with where my budget's at, we're down to personnel. So when the time comes, if it comes, we are going to lose positions. So thank
Well,
you.
we are going to be paying close attention to the revenues coming into Franklin County. I've asked him to be in here monthly, reporting that. And if the trends keep going the way they are, then yes, we will be laying off people.
My hope, and I think we could talk to all the electeds, is that we put together probably in January some kind of a budget committee. I mean, we meet monthly already, but we start some kind of a process overseen by the commissioners to start into, evaluation of and producing reports and that stuff takes time. But I hope we could have some kind of and maybe as a function of the monthly budgeting meeting, to pull more people in and try to find ways to do what is called, it's prioritized budgeting, where we publicly list, as Mr. Peck was talking about, whether it's revenue positions, whatever the board drives, quite frankly, but that then we back into that so that if this hits us, we can be ready. And I know a lot of I think all of the electeds at one point would support a longer input cycle and evaluation of how budgets are going. So I appreciate that.
Matt,
Thanks.
here's this year's 141,000 that we've received for that from the state.
Okay.
And then last.
And I
then
just wanted
last
everybody to
year,
know, I mean, ours are still
139,000.
showing up there, but I wanted everybody to know what that was tied to, and that it was literally tied to additional duties that were taken from the state and pushed back to the county. Thankfully, they were funded, which I'm sure Mr. Peck knows is not very common coming out of Olympia, but in this case, it was. So I just wanted that to be on the record. Thanks.
So is there revenue at stake for your request? If you don't get your request, does any of this revenue stream stop?
No, there's no, no, does
From the
this,
state?
what I haven't looked at is if this revenue was directly tied to this function, but no. Essentially, we have to produce it from our office, and the positions I have, you know, they weren't evaluated to do auditing from a DOL standpoint to go off-site and do what they're doing. We would produce it internally and give it to the DOL. Now we got to produce it, report it, and then send it into the new system. So there is no, I mean, the revenue is already, it's coming in. They're saying, look, do this, we're going to give you this, we want to get done. So, but there's no, the revenue is associated with the
But
activity.
if you don't have the staff to fulfill the function, does the state stop sending the money?
I don't know, I'd have to ask. I
All
think
right.
they'd ask why we don't. But all I would do, quite frankly, is probably shift my accounting, I would meet it. You know, I would shift somebody else, much like you're suggesting. I mean, everyone's had to do that in the past. You, Mr. Peck, were here in '08 and went through the last downturn, so you know what, you just get it, just like the county needs to do, you prioritize those functions, whether it's election or anything else, and you find some other way to, once you get down to the number 10, you know, you start to cut there. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer, Mrs. Kelzer.
So just for the record here, I do have 12s in my office also, and I did have a conversation with Eric, if we're going to go back that far, and he said that we could not move those 12s unless we moved it as a whole with the union. And whether he was correct in saying that or not, but that's what kept me from moving those 12s. And yes, I do have a 12 that she has a family, and she's at a grade 12 at $18 and 18 something, and she's already told me that you know, she's probably going to leave, and so then I run that risk again of trying to find somebody else to fill that position. And in the last 6 years, we have hired 4 people to continually to fill those positions. Also, when we started this off, it was with the Gallinger, and we decided to let them go, and then we had Consor come in to do a study. They said they were not going to do a salary study, so let me know if I'm incorrect about any of this. And they said,
Forgive the intrusion, but I was told the very same thing by the senior gentleman from Consor who interviewed most of the electeds, told me there is no salary study in this Consor contract. So it's still unclear to me if there is or not.
so I was told that they looked at who was at risk, and there was 10 of them were at risk. And I'm not sure who those at risk were. And out of those 10, 2 of them needed to be reevaluated. And so I'm not really sure where that's gone. And then also that in January, I was told, because I wanted to move my 12, my 2 12 employees, that in January that we were going to look at it as a whole and look at job descriptions and then determine who was going to be moved and how they were going to be moved. And so, but here we are in the middle of a budgeting, trying to close the gap, and we're moving people. So that's just my opinion there.
Commissioner Mullen, are you still there?
I am, and I definitely see the need in Don's office. If I understood him correctly, he said the first year would probably be about a wash for the county. But long-term, new construction needs to be taken care of. And if he needs that employee, then and it's statutorily required. Where the county has a revenue problem, it doesn't make any sense to me not to put that position in place. bringing in close to 300,000 in revenue from the state to do the audits on the independent licensing. He's only asking for what, $8,000 additional to his budget? Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct, for 3 positions. Movement in 3
I
positions.
personally would rather see the travel cut half. I mean, if it gets to that point, or at least ask all the departments to try to cut their travel. We're spending $125,000 a year on travel. I don't think I've spent $300 in the 3 years I've been there. I would rather see those cuts being made and take care of our employees and put people in a position that's going to raise the revenue for the county.
That's an option there, cut the travel.
Commissioner Mullen, do you concur with funding a government affairs position over these other positions?
I think the auditor's position is more important, but I also agree that if we can find a grant writer to work in the commissioner's office, I think that would be money well spent.
Well, my experience, there are grant writers who will work on a fee basis and get paid when they have a successful grant. You don't necessarily need to have an employee doing it. And the government affairs function is much broader than grant writing. So it's my view that these positions increase in the auditor's office, and especially the position in the assessor's office, are a far higher need to the county. And it's not to say that these can't all be good functions, but those are higher needs than a government affairs position.
Chair, permission to speak when I get the
Mr.
opportunity.
Gonzalez.
I just do want to put on the record that we made some tough decisions and we eliminated a position, the Shirley Jones's position, to make our budget work. Fortunately, we were able to find our position in Public Works. We've consolidated, and we actually came in with less people and under budget. So I want to put that on the record that we haven't grown government, we're under budget, and I want to read this recommendation from Consor. You know, to Commissioner Peck, you know, the penny wise, a pound foolish. I mean, this is a really good investment. I was in that government affairs role where it was grant identification, and he's absolutely correct. You know, this is a person that would identify grants, perhaps write a few, and also work with the people that you can contract out to do that. Currently, we don't have anybody doing that across the county. You could argue Public Works does a good job with that. Occasionally, the sheriff's office is able to do that and scrape along. But I'm going to read this recommendation from Consor, and please keep in mind that, you know, budgeting-wise, we came in under budget. So we've been fiscally responsible, and that is keeping in mind this person is within that framework. So this comes from Clark Worth, and I'm going to just read it verbatim. It says, "It's clear that Franklin County needs a higher profile to influence decision-making at the state and federal levels. That would likely include an in-house county public affairs professional plus contract lobby firms for state and federal governments. Some specific needs to be filled and expectations are outlined. The state, this is the most important need. State government dramatically impacts Franklin County's budget every year, and every day aspects of best practices program at the state level would include a legislative strategy, which we've never had, regulatory affairs, securing state funds, advocacy, lobbying, and relationship building and communications, which we have never specifically had for Franklin County specifically. At the federal level, increasingly important given Franklin County's continued growth and prominence, utter reliance on federal policy for agriculture, Hanford, Columbia, and Snake River dams, et cetera, a best practices federal affairs program would include these functions: support, oppose legislation, advocacy, securing funds, coalition building, communication support. Public affairs, some in-house capacity, county stuff needed, strategic communications, media relations, media training, policy briefings, crisis communication. Those areas I will handle. I always have since I've been here. Franklin County should demand results from this important investment. Lobbying is not a naughty word. It calls for fact-based advocacy on your benefit, communicating strategically to shape opinions, deliver results, managing issues involve Franklin County, state, and federal partners, making effective use of media to convey your message, forging strategic relationships and state and federal policymakers. So, you know, those are some of the things that they're recommending within the scope that is an investment. It will be a return on investment, something that is desperately needed. We're the only jurisdiction of our size that does not have somebody lobbying on our behalf. And I can guarantee there will be a return on investment. So that's what I have to say about it. It'd be one thing if I was chair, if I was fattening up my office, if I was adding people, but I had to make executive level decisions, move people around to shape this budget so it's the most effective way to move this county forward. Because right now, we have no one out there advocating for us.
So I'm going to speak to those points. It is grossly
Chair recognizes Commissioner Peck.
It is grossly disingenuous to the taxpayers to suggest that moving a project manager position from the commissioner's office to Public Works is somehow a savings. It's almost offensive to think that we would present that kind of an argument. It still costs the taxpayers. It's not a savings to the county. And to suggest that you've cut or saved by doing that is absurd. Secondly, the county, together with many other counties, gets pretty extensive representation to the state legislature. And I don't know about your experience working with the state legislature. I've been doing it for 15 years. And I've watched those organizations, City of Pasco and others, who have the fiscal means to hire high-end, high-powered lobbyists. And sometimes there is a return on that investment, but not nearly as often as people might think. But it is not a cost that Franklin County can bear, certainly at this time. Consor's recommendations are idealistic. And in fact, I had that conversation with the gentleman that interviewed me, that there are a lot of things that would be nice to do. There's a lot of things we could do, but every one of them's got to be paid for. And there's got to be a prioritization in that mix. If you want to do a contract lobby with somebody, a lobbyist, I would encourage strongly that you look at working with City of Pasco and partnering on their contract lobby agreement rather than going and looking to hire somebody that you think is going to do that in-house. The suggestion that we're the only county that doesn't have any representation of that nature is flat wrong. I work with 39 counties, every one of them in the state, in the Legislative Steering Committee. I co-chaired that for 2 years. It's just flat wrong. It's an incorrect statement. We cannot afford the kind of lobbying power that a King County or a Pierce County brings. So I'll be the first to acknowledge that they've got a hand up in that respect. But we've got assessors who have statutory obligations to collect taxes, money we're leaving on the table, and we're talking about hiring a government affairs position and claiming to pay for it by cutting a position that we really just moved to another department. It's utter nonsense.
Well, Chair, I'll say we can't afford not to do it. You know, my logic, I believe, is sound. I checked in with the City of Pasco to see if we can partner on lobbying, something they won't do. They just want their own alignment. You know, I do think we made a fiscally sound decision. The position was sunsetting. We found another solid position that person could fit into, and I felt like we made a good decision. So from that standpoint, again, you know, this is a person that will have some return on investment. I guarantee it. I've identified lobbying firms that they may not be high-powered, but they'll be effective. I've worked with them in the past when I was government affairs director at some other organizations. So sometimes you have to make investments in things in order to get a return on investment. But, you know, the whole penny wise, a pound foolish, I mean, that's another case right here. We desperately need this. I'll stand by that. And if we don't do it, I know what the ramifications will be. what we continue to have here is zero presence over in Olympia.
Mr. Gonzalez, in the
Commissioner
time that
Peck,
you've been associated with this county,
Commissioner Peck, are you asking to be recognized?
no, I'm speaking.
Well,
Have
the
you
chair
ever-
does not recognize you then, Commissioner Peck.
All right. Then I'm going to
Because
speak
all
anyway.
we're doing here is we're arguing.
No, what we're doing
we're
is the
doing
chair
here
is
is-
allowing the
is
county
you're
administrator to
arguing.
pretend he's a commissioner. That's what
No.
we're doing.
No.
No, that is what we're doing. This is a discussion among
Commissioner
the Board
Peck,
of
you're out of
Commissioners.
order. And at this time, if you're not going to restrain yourself, I'm going to recess until you can.
I'm fully restrained.
You are.
Yeah,
Okay, well then,
have been through the
quit
whole meeting.
arguing over a one position, as if it's going to cost the county its budget, when we are spending $2.7 million for people not to take our insurance. And I'm going to keep putting that on the record until the public starts showing up and demanding that this stop. $2.7 million. So at this time, we're not going to get anything resolved. I would really appreciate
Chair,
Commissioner
point of order.
Mullen being in the room. So at this time, I
Fair
think,
point of order. You're obligated to hear points of order unless you're not going to follow Robert's
what is your
rules
point of
either.
order, Commissioner? Because it better be on rules and not your opinion.
Well, you've refused to adopt any rules for this board, so I'm confused as to why that's the basis. But I'm seeking the floor, and I want to make the point, most people
No,
know.
point of order is we're out of order with the rules. And we are following
Okay, all
Robert's
right.
Rules of Order, so what
right.
is your point?
Chair refused to
Point of
grant
order needs to have a point of a breaking of the rules.
the rules you've refused to adopt. So let me make the points for you again. The chair is allowing the county administrator to participate in a Board of Commissioner discussion, which is fine, but the chair cannot restrict my ability to speak to him, and until the chair is willing to accept some level of rules, and you've refused to accept any rules, any whatsoever,
No,
you
Commissioner.
don't get to make them up as you go.
No,
That's the point of
I have
order.
accepted the rules, and the rules is that you got to recognize the chair to have the floor, and you refuse to do that. So you're out of order,
Please,
Commissioner
please
Peck.
tell me when we adopted rules.
Oh, these are the rules we have adopted. You refuted them.
No.
They've been in,
They've not been adopted
at this
ever.
point in time, we are going to adjourn until tomorrow because obviously nothing is getting done today with the pettiness that's going on in this meeting. So at this point in time, we will adjourn until Commissioner Mullen is back in the room. What is the meeting time tomorrow?
9 a.m., sir.
9 a.m. Well, that's our meeting, commissioner meeting. We'll follow the budget right after that?
The budget one's 1 o'clock, I believe.
Can we just continue why don't we continue after the commissioner meeting with the budget? With a full slate of commissioners in the room?
I don't know if we can because I think it's been
It's been
advertised.
posted?
It's been
Okay.
advertised as 1.
Okay, so we will recess until 1 o'clock tomorrow.